what you're going to find in the chapter is we got a series of questions. We don't really have the answers, but what ends up happening is we'll ask you questions like, okay, there's a set of questions in here that called the Kinder Life Plan questions that talk about what would you do if you had all the money in the world? What would you do if you only had 5 years to live? What would you do if you only had a day to live? Like, what matters to you?
Welcome to the Childfree Wealth Podcast, hosted by Bree and Dr. J, Certified Financial Planner. Here we discuss life and finances as it relates to being child-free. This podcast is for educational and entertainment purposes only. Please consult your advisor before implementing any ideas heard on this podcast.
Hey, Childfree Wealth listeners. We are back talking about what's in my new book, The Childfree Guide to Life and Money. If you haven't bought it yet, go to your favorite bookstore, get it ordered. But we're going to talk about Chapter 2, which is choosing a life plan that is yours. And depending on kind of what you've been reading, you may or may not be familiar with the term life plan or life planning. But it's a deliberate process to say, what do I want to be when I grow up? Kind of like, what's the point and what do we want to do? And for child-free folks, one of the challenges is the standard life script doesn't match us. So the standard life script, let me introduce this because I'm going to use this standard life script throughout the book and throughout all these discussions. The standard life script is the one that says you go to school, you get married, you buy a house, you have 2.5 kids, you work 25 years, you retire, you pass on money to the next generation. That's the standard life script. Also called the American Dream. That's the house, the 2.5 kids, the white picket fence, the dog, standard script. And what happens is for many of us, we don't realize how much power that standard life script has. See, when you've chosen a child-free life, or if it's not by choice, if you're childless, you're on a different script, but yet that indoctrination, that way of living is part of you. You know, we were told what we had to do. And for my first book, The Portrait of Childfree Wealth, somebody explained it this way. They went to church, and every time they went to church, the discussions were all about being a good mom, being a good dad. Honor thy father, honor thy mother. Like, just your whole life revolves around having kids. You know, I'm living in the South, and when you're deep in the South, you say hi to people, they go, you know, their first two questions are, where's your church home? And how many kids do you have? Now, mind you, I don't have a church home or kids, so it feels a little weird. But like, the question isn't like, do you have kids? It's how many kids do you have? So that standard life script is everywhere. And we need to figure out what we're going to keep from that standard life script and what we're willing to throw away. And I want to be careful on this because when you leave the standard life script or the standard life plan, you've technically deviated from it. And some people look at that and say, well, then you're a deviant. That's a negative term. That is not what we're talking about. You have picked a different life plan. It's not better. It's not worse. It's just different. You know, my wife and I, we're child-free. It's not really kind of like who we are. It's just part of our life. But it's mean we had different choices. It means when my wife got offered a job 1,200 miles away, we picked up the dog and cat and drove. No big deal. It means we have different flexibility. Now, then again, it gets judged too. You know, where, you know, oh, well, you know, I see this on social media a lot. Well, child-free people can't be tired because they don't have kids. No, we can still be tired. We can still have good days. We can still have bad days. We are living a different life script, not better or worse. Now, let's be real. Our parents, our family, our culture, our church might believe it's worse. You know, I had this discussion with my mom, and she says, oh, you do another book on child-free self? Okay. Well, I don't understand that because if I never, you know, if me and dad never had kids, I mean, what would happen? I mean, you need to have kids. And I'm like, look, if you never have kids, I wouldn't be writing this book and I wouldn't be worried about it. Okay. Like, I don't know, like a lot of judgment, a lot of things come with it. But the key is to realize whose voice is in your head saying you need to do something. And let me give you an example of this. A lot of my clients, they're primarily child-free folks, will say, well, I got to buy a house. I'm like, well, why? Well, because I was told I have to. Why? Well, buying a house is part of the standard life script. You buy a house because you maybe it's a school system. You got to settle down. Maybe it's an investment. But for child-free folks, if you're going to move every couple of years, no. We got a whole chapter on buying versus renting, and I'm going to tell you, rent unless you have a real reason you want to buy a house. But that buying a house is part of that standard life script. And what happens is we get dragged back to that standard life script without realizing it. This is the key. You gotta ask yourself, whose voice in my head saying I'm gonna do it? What I want you to be thinking about instead is, what do you want to do in life? What matters to you? Now, I'll give you another example. I was working with somebody, and they said, well, I have a house. I hate the house. It's so much work. What I really want to do is travel. Okay, let's do that. And why not? The editor for the book, her and her dog were living in a different Airbnb each month across the U.S. Awesome. Do it. You can pick a different life plan. And by the way, you don't have to wait until you retire to do that. You can do that earlier in your life because you're child-free. We'll actually get back to it. There's a point where you can actually have too many choices. The analysis paralysis can set in. What do I really want to be when I grow up? It's one of those questions I ask people often. But you've got to figure out what matters to you and then make your financial plan and everything else point towards it. Now, a little transparency here. Whatever you figure out for a life plan, it'll change. Okay? I think of life plans kind of like 5-7 year segments. In the next 5 or 7 years, that's what I'm going to do. 5 or 7 years from now, that's what I'm going to do. And those are rough goals. But you have to pick what matters to you. If you ask other people what you should do, they'll tell you, but they're going to tell you from their lens. What you're going to find in the chapter is we got a series of questions. We don't really have the answers, but what ends up happening is we'll ask you questions like, okay, there's a set of questions in here that called the Kinder Life Planning questions that talk about what would you do if you had all the money in the world? What would you do if you only had 5 years to live? What would you do if you only had a day to live? What matters to you? I've been working through an exercise with people. Dish that. What matters to you is what matters. You need to figure out your life plan, your goals, and then make your finances fit it. Don't make your finances drive your life. I have clients all the time ask me, well, when can I retire? And I'll go, well, do you want to retire? And they say, no. Well, then why are you asking me when I can retire? You need to figure out your life plan and figure out how to make it match.
If you enjoyed the show, please consider leaving a rating or review. We'd love to keep the conversation going. Please let us know your thoughts wherever comments are available or email us at media@childfreewealth.com. To stay up to date, find and follow Childfree Wealth on social media. If you're interested in working with us, learn more by visiting our website, childfreewealth.com. We'll see you next time.